Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, also known as the Flipendo Simulator, was the first game in this worldwide hit franchise. Although there are still games being published within the Harry Potter universe, such as Hogwarts Legacy, I want to directly compare Philosopher's Stone with the game which marked a spiritual end to the game saga following main events of the novels and movies. And that is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Was it better? What had changed over the course of 10 years between these games, and what happened to Flipendo? First thing that is fairly well known, but still should be clarified regarding Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone game, is that there are actually 5 games of the same name. It was developed by 5 separate developers on 5 separate platforms. In this video, I'll be talking only about the PC version, since that's the one I grew up with. I never owned a console, and although nothing can be compared to the iconic PS1 Hagrid, I feel like the PC port has left the strongest lasting legacy. It was developed by Studio No Wonder and published in 2001. The development process was challenging to say the least, mainly because due to the high security around the production of the first Harry Potter movie. You can learn more about this in an interview with one of the developers, Christo Vucetic, put together by creator Flandreau. But to keep it in a nutshell, the game was being developed at the same time as the movie was being shot. The expectation was to have the game more or less replicate the movie aesthetic. The only problem with this is that in fear of leaks, the movie production team only shared distorted and blurred pictures of the sets to the developer team, and these materials were basically useless to them. So one of the team members physically flew to the movie set and was allowed only to take notes and no photo or video material. Of course, they had a fully published novel where to gather inspiration. This can be felt most notably through inclusion of characters like Peeves, who was cut from the movies. And they also had consultations from the J.K. Rowling's team regarding questions about spells and lore, but the visual aesthetic was purely made out of notes and recollections of one person. Given this and the technical limitations of working in Unreal Engine 1, I think the team overall pulled off quite a remarkable feat, creating something more than just a bland shovelware product with no added value, individual character, or creativity. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 was developed by EA Brightlight and published in 2011. It was not only the last game in the series following the novels, but it was also the last game to be developed by EA Brightlight before it was silently shut down by EA. There is not much to be found online about the development process, but it's clear that at this point in the series they basically copied the movie set locations and visual style down to the game characters even wearing the same clothes as their movie counterparts. Also, contrary to the first game, they had the original movie cast to voice their respective characters in the game.
Let's get to Honeydukes and find our way into Hogwarts.
So in general, it's safe to assume they had more resources, more budget, and better development tools than 10 years ago when the first game was developed. One of the core gameplay elements in both games are of course various spells, which is expected of a game following a young wizard's life. But each game takes a wildly different approach in how the player unlocks and utilizes the spells and how they interact with the game world. Although in the first book Harry does not intentionally cast even a single spell, it would be very challenging to make and sell a video game about a magic school without including any magic at all. So the first game includes a total of 5 spells. Alhambra for unlocking magic chests and secret areas, Wingardium Leviosa for object levitation, Incendio that deals with magical plants, Lumos which reveals platforms made of light, and of course Nintendo! Or the knockback spell that can be used to push buttons and objects as well as stun some creatures. Spells are taught mostly by professors, except for Alhambra, which by some odd reason is presented by Hermione Granger. Player learns the spells by playing a minigame where you have to follow the spell symbol path with your mouse. Now it seems fairly trivial, but doing this 20 years ago with a ball mouse and horrible hand-to-eye coordination, at least for me, was a very challenging experience. The main purpose of spells in the first game is to get past various environmental obstacles and solve puzzles to progress the level as well as find collectibles and secrets. Spells are introduced gradually via spell challenges, each centered around the new spell in hand. Although the number of spells is quite limited, they all tie really well with the overall game aesthetic. Don't feel too over or underused, and generally I'd say they are crafted and implemented well enough. The same spell system was upgraded and polished in the next two subsequent titles as well. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 features 7 spells and 1 special ability. Stupefy, Expelliarmus, Expulso, Confringo, Petrificus Totalus, Impedimenta, Protego, and the ability to apparate. The game describes them as Stunning Spell, Protego Disarm, Rapid Fire Cast, Explosive Reaction Cast, Long Range Cast, Multi-Target Lock-On, Defensive Shield Cast, and Short Distance Travel. But they could be as well called Glock, Flashbang, SMG, Shotgun, Sniper Rifle, Heat-Singing Missile, and Tactical Shield. All of these spells are combat-based and basically function as different weapons. They are not used for literally anything else as just blasting enemies. Even the apparition is only used to quickly change cover during combat. All of the spells are unlocked one by one at certain points of the game without any real reason behind it. I guess we can assume all the characters just forgot about other spells until a specific point in the story. Also, they are presented and numbered in some weird out of order way in the pause menu. Not like it's a big deal, but still I find it mildly infuriating. Each game includes a fair amount of collectibles and secrets for the player to find. It might not seem that big of a deal, but in my opinion, the implementation of these elements illustrate how both games approach world building and exploration. The Philosopher's Stone includes 2 main collectibles, Bertie bought every flavored beans, and the wizard cards. Beans are scattered all over the game world and are most commonly found collectible. They serve as guides for exploration and mini rewards. If there are beans, it must be worth exploring. Also, they are used to purchase wizard cards from Fred and George, as well as unlock the final sort of secret wizard card. And these cards are, in my opinion, the main driver of exploration in this game. From the way they are introduced and presented in the game, they bring this feeling of importance and grandeur. Each time a card is collected, there is this little animation of the card levitating, spinning, and exploding in a fireworks type of manner. To find these cards, the player will almost always have to go out of their way and off the beaten path. They feel very rewarding to find, and each time when you locate a secret area, there is a small hope inside that this might be the place to find a wizard card you're looking for. It took me years and several playthroughs to find all the cards as a kid, because they are quite scarce and often pretty well hidden, but this scarcity and being hard to find only works in their favor. Another part why these cards work so well is in the design of each card. There was a separate artist working on these cards, so they all have distinct style and there is uniqueness to each character on the cards. There is a great interview on YouTube with the wizard card illustrator Jeff Willis, which was put together by creator Phil of Glimmer, and I can highly recommend watching that as well, but it's safe to say that these illustrations together with the small pieces of trivia presented with each card are extremely influential part of the first Harry Potter game and were a clear driver for exploration. Also, the fact that you can unlock the last wizard card only by collecting every single card during the campaign is a strong incentive for replayability, because these cards are missable collectibles. If you get past one, you won't be able to acquire it later, and some of these cards are pretty well hidden, so finding them all on your first playthrough without using a guide can prove to be quite challenging. Deathly Hallows Part 2 has 3 types of collectibles: characters, music, and challenges. I'll start with characters and music. These are one of the most low-effort type of collectibles. Basically, you take the same character models or music already to be found in the game and unlock the ability to view them separately from the main menu. Sure, it might be interesting for someone, but I find it a very lazy approach to create at least some kind of collectible, without spending any extra resources. At this point, you might as well don't include any collectibles at all. But then there are the challenges. At first I really hoped these would be something fresh. I was convinced this must be a new game mode, something where you defend against hordes of enemies or some other difficulty modifiers are introduced into the gameplay, but again I was met with disappointment. Challenges are the exact same levels, just with a timer slapped on the screen and some arbitrary time constraints added. The only difference from the main game being that you have all the spells already unlocked, and at the end of the level your performance affects the final time score. And honestly, this could serve as a pretty okay extra content to prolong the experience of a game, if the main gameplay and levels were actually good. Now that I know my reward is to replay most of the game more or less exactly the same as I just did, with the added requirement to be quick, I don't feel too engaged to search for these collectibles. This also ties well to the next aspect, the placement of these collectibles. In contrast to the first game, where to find the collectibles you had to access secret areas or wander off. In this game, the collectibles are just there. The game has pretty much no secret areas for the player to find by wandering off. Most of the time, the collectibles are located just so they are not obviously visible on first entering an area. It all illustrates how in this game, the secrets and collectibles were just slapped on the already finished game with minimum effort, just because they are required. At least for me, they bring close to no added value and just emphasize the poor level design and overall mundane nature of the game. In both titles, the final boss battle is fought against Harry's main nemesis, Lord Voldemort. And although the final boss battles are a relatively small part of the overall game time, I find it interesting to put them side by side and compare what's the approach in each game. Deathly Hallows Part 2, being a more action-based overall, also has some mini-bosses along the way. The fights are nothing special. You just fight against the mini-bosses as every other enemy in the game. They just have a health bar, and the occasional quick-time event disrupts the pacing. At the very end, it's more or less the same when you're fighting Voldemort. You can split the fight in 3 phases: the usual spell battle, a chase sequence, and whatever this is. The final phase of this fight is what frustrates me the most. It already looked kind of lame in the movie, at least compared to how the fight went down in the books. But in the game, this recreation is even more disappointing. The only mechanic is to balance the beam and try to keep it in focus, whatever that means. It feels awkward, and there is basically no strategy or skill involved, just trying to aim at the center of the screen. The first game takes a different approach. The final boss rush involves multiple phases of puzzles and obstacles for the player to overcome to even reach the final fight. The quality of these final boss rush challenges differs quite a bit, but still I enjoy the concept. The final battle also has multiple phases. In the first, you have to flipendo your way to Quirrell and then fight him afterwards. As Harry does not know any offensive spells, it's interesting to see how the developers came up with ways of Voldemort damaging himself with the assistance from Harry. Even when replaying the game today, the final battle is not that easy. The player himself has to find and understand the ways to damage Voldemort, as well as learn his attack and movement pattern to have a chance of beating him. This was basically mission impossible for me as a kid, but I think that's kind of the point of a final boss battle in games. It has to be challenging for it to provide any kind of satisfaction after beating it. Overall, these boss battles in each game illustrate how much out-of-box thinking was applied in designing them and what experience the developers wanted to craft. Either a streamlined movie-like game where you are mostly the observer, or an engaging and challenging puzzle where you have to find and figure out the various mechanics yourself. Last thing I want to compare are the general vibes of each game. To help with pinpointing the exact things and avoid generalization, this can be further boiled down to visual aesthetic throughout the games, and the music that accompany these scenes. It's not fully objective to compare graphics directly, because last game in the series of course was made with more advanced technology for development and generally looks more sophisticated. All the characters and sets are basically copies from the movies down to the very last details. And although this is quite impressive and technically more advanced, I find the general visual style of this game very grey. Same as the movies progressed from vibrant and rather saturated color palette to a more mature, serious drama-like look, the games of course followed. But if in the movie we at least get to enjoy the actor's performance, then in the game we're left with this mundane recreation of places from the movie, all with the same dark undertones and low contrast environments. And by itself this is not a bad vibe, just that it stays the same all along the playthrough. And this is combined with the gameplay and enemies who also stay the same. The locations change, but the vibes don't. Where on the other hand you have the first game. Although you can notably see the individual pixels and large flat polygons, the developers still managed to create a plethora of different and interesting environments. Each spell challenge has its unique locations, and each location has some unique visual aesthetic. Sometimes even just by changing how a scene is being lit, it gets a totally different result and you feel like being in different parts of the castle. Just compare being on the castle grounds on your way to herbology class, in the dungeons trying to find potion ingredients for Snape, or on top of Hogwarts learning Wingardium Leviosa. These are three different places with unique vibes and character. These vibes are only amplified by the incredible music in the background. The soundtrack of the first game was composed by Jeremy Soule, and it is absolutely incredible. It encapsulates the emotions and feelings of being in Hogwarts, wandering around and experiencing all the different encounters along the way.
Lovely day, don't you think?
It can make you feel like home, cozy sitting around a fireplace. It can make you feel adventurous and happy while exploring the castle grounds, or it can make you anxious and scared when trying to avoid Filch and Mrs. Norris. Wherever you go, whatever you do, the music is there to help the scene become alive. All these songs are ingrained in my memory. Just hearing each of the pieces brings forward so many emotions. I was surprised to learn that it was all made by using VSTs or virtual instruments and not a real orchestra. But it still holds up as an amazing soundtrack even today, and I'm not even sure if it would have the same iconic vibe if it was recorded with real instruments. I can't objectively compare it to the last game's soundtrack. It will always sit in a very special place in my heart, and at least for me it carries the most nostalgic value from this game. So I could try to dissect the Deathly Hallows Part 2 soundtrack by James Hannigan, and even though it might be a decent piece of music, if I compare anything against the melodies of the first game, the result will always be heavily one-sided, and I'm okay with that. Overall, revisiting these games side by side was an interesting experience. Philosopher's Stone might be rough around the edges, but it feels creative and full of small ideas that make it stand out. Even with all its limitations, it tries to build a world that's fun to explore and occasionally even surprises you. Deathly Hallows Part 2, on the other hand, feels like the complete opposite. A game with far better tools and resources that somehow ends up doing less with them. It's technically more advanced, but also predictable and narrow in scope. You can really see how the series shifted from playful experimentation to a more boxed-in, action-heavy design. Whether that's progress or not probably depends on what you're looking for. Personally, I think Philosopher's Stone still captures that early 2000s charm, which has aged more gracefully, and that makes it worth coming back to, even if most of what you're doing is just spamming Flipendo.